about that, because that was true under President Bush as well, who famously said that he thought he could trust Vladimir Putin, only to find out that he couldn't, and then Putin invaded separatist region of Georgia, and the U.S. really didn't do much about it. Isn't the same predicament here, which is you may know what Putin wants to do, but what are you prepared to do in terms of the use of American power to stop it?
Well, first of all, I think, like as I said, I think previous administrations deserve criticism as well with regards to clearly viewing what Vladimir Putin's goals are here. I think moving forward, if you look at, for example, Secretary Kerry a moment ago mentioned success with the START treaty, yet we know that the Russians have basically violated every major treaty they've ever entered into. We see how they've basically lied. I mean, let's call it what it is. They are lying, and this government is a government of liars, the Russian government. And you see what's happening now in Crimea. I mean, they're claiming they're not there. You've got these individuals showing up in unmarked uniforms, wearing masks, but clearly they're Russian troops, even though they refuse to acknowledge it. So you're dealing with a government that lies as a matter of course, and it's very difficult to enter an understanding with them on anything when they are willing to lie and cover things up in this way.
You're saying, as you did in a piece that you wrote for Politico about how to confront Russia, that we got to use blunt talk. So I ask you for some blunt talk. Is Russia an enemy of the United States now?
I think they're increasingly behaving like an enemy of international peace and international norms. If you look after the end of World War II, and certainly through the Cold War era, the spread of democracy and freedom, and established norms for nations to interact with one another so that we would never have another world war. Russia doesn't, under this president, Putin, does not seem interested in any of that. So they are an enemy of that, and they are certainly, as it regards to that, an enemy of the United States, and with regards to those things I've just outlined. And if you look at the positions they've taken on issue after issue, Russia has been an obstacle to U.S. national interests.
Is it a concern of yours that 10 days ago the president said, we're watching and we want to make sure that nobody crosses the line or there'll be consequences? Last Sunday at this table, Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, said it'd be a grave mistake for Russia to invade the Crimea. On Friday, the president says there'll be a cost to intervention. What does it say to you that Vladimir Putin has ignored the United States for 10 days?
Well, part of it is he's made a cost-benefit analysis. He has weighed the costs of doing what he's done, and he has viewed the benefits of it. And clearly he has concluded that the benefits far outweigh the costs. We need to endeavor to change that calculus. And I think Secretary Kerry outlined accurately enough that one of our goals here needs to be to isolate Russia, to exact an extraordinary price to pay on the international front for them, for their ambitions, ultimately for individuals in that government and for their economy. The other part of this that's not receiving enough attention is the U.S. must convene our allies, both in Europe and through NATO, to strengthen the interim government in Kiev, to allow them to transition to a more stable government, a democratic government, be able to hold their elections. That's critical, too, because I think the next phase in this, perhaps you're seeing the outlines of it already, are Russians trying to undermine the government in Kiev.
Do you think there is a military option here for the United States or for NATO? In other words, do you advocate now going beyond what you just heard from Secretary Kerry, which was economic isolation, perhaps expelling Russia from the G8, particular sanctions to key Russian officials and the like?
Well, I think if you're asking me whether the U.S. should be taking military strikes against Russian troops in Ukraine or in Crimea, I would argue to you that I don't think anyone is advocating for that. I am saying, however, that our NATO alliance needs to be reinvigorated. It is an important alliance. If you look at countries that neighbor Ukraine now, for example, Poland and others who are part of that alliance, I think we need to be providing them assurances of the importance of this alliance, including perhaps revisiting, or in fact I think we should revisit the missile defense shield that we talked about so often. Beyond that, I would say that as part of strengthening and stabilizing the government in Kiev now so that they can transition to stability down the road as well, I think part of that should be strengthening their defense capabilities, because